Welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales, as we return to covering Mexican Mafia members over the past 60 plus years, continuing with the letter M. There was Joe Joker Martel, who was with the Ontario Black Angels. He had a C number, 61346, and I believe was made MA then sometime in the 1980s. He got released on that number and came back with an H number, 44867. He then was housed at Pelican Bay, I believe got out again and came back with an F number, as in Frank, 88795. Maybe some of you guys encountered him in CDC. There was an Albert Badger Martinez at Hawaiian Gardens. I've seen many pictures of this guy in the feds, and he has a BOP number of 56252-112. He was moved to the LA Metro Detention Center a few years ago, but is currently housed at Florence ADX Max. They just don't put anybody at the ADX, so most likely Badger's a heavy hitter. There was an interesting, intelligent, and dangerous individual named Ernesto Sandans Martinez that was made a member of both the California and Arizona Mexican Mafia, an extremely rare occurrence. The only other one that I know of in that case that is still living is Pete Boy Moreno, who will be covered in our next episode. Sundance Martinez was convicted of killing an Arizona highway trooper as well as killing a store clerk in Blythe, California. He stood trial on both. He was given the death penalty in Arizona for the cop's murder and a life sentence in California. After his trial in Riverside County, he was shipped back to Arizona, where he is currently housed. When he returned, his dual membership in both the Arizona and California MA was protested by some of his MA carnales. Eventually, Menendez voted to strip him of his Arizona Mexican Mafia status. For more details, see a very well done video done by Cricket on Prison Chronicles, which is his YouTube channel. There was Eulalio Lalo Martinez out of Lomas in South San Gabriel. He had a D number, 39784. He was made MA sometime in the 1980s and was one of the first inmates that were moved to Pelican Bay when it opened in 1989, and was involved in a hit on an LA County deputy, I believe back in 1992. Understand that he also ordered the murder of a Pato Schubert in 1998. He believed Pato had been responsible for the murder of his brother. He was also involved in the riot back in 2000 where the MA attacked the blacks at Pelican Bay. He then was brought back to LA County Jail, where he was a shot caller for many years, but I shall overdose in mid-June 2013. Then we have Francisco Puppet Martinez Ruiz, who was from 18th Street. Puppet basically made his clica, the Columbia Little Cycles, the number one clica for 18th Street. They were a big money maker, in big part because they controlled MacArthur Park, which is loaded with junkies. And Puppet and his crews were happy to supply them with dope. Puppet came into the system with a C number, 57449, which he got as a result of a homicide. Understand that he was involved in a hit on Angel from Santa Monica with Boxer Enriquez in the early 80s. He was housed at San Quentin 84 through 85 and paroled in 1987. When he got out, he was involved in a war with Chuco Castro from VNE. But it wasn't just Chuco. A lot of guys were envious of Puppet. Like I said, he was making a lot of money, perhaps the number one moneymaker for the MA back then. And while he was very heavily involved in 18th Street politics, the MA is supposed to take precedence over your clica, but a lot of people didn't look at it that way. So they started putting hits out on his guys, and his guys started putting out hits on MA guys. It was a bloody mess. Puppet caught a few parole violations in the early 90s and was signed an H number, 48909, due to a theft of a motor vehicle. He was released from Pelican Bay in 1994. Like I said, due to politics, a lot of guys were concerned about Puppet and his Columbia Little Cycles clique in particular. I understand he was put on freeze in early 94, and some people say put on the hit list. He was busted on a firearm in 1995 and sent to the feds on BOP number 9114701. He was hit with a RICO case in 2008 and I believe filed a lawsuit against authorities. By that time, he had been considered good again. I've said it before, 18th Street was a big moneymaker. And while 18th Street was on the green light list while I was at Folsom in the early 90s, and we had to lock up a lot of their shot callers, I understand that Night Owl Castro paid a fine and got him off that list. This was a good deal for 18th Street to be back in the good graces of La M, especially when they hit the prison systems. And it also was a good deal for La M since 18th Street made so much money and is the biggest gang in LA. I don't think they wanted another Maravilla situation. Puppet has been housed at the ADX for over a decade now. There was a Gabriel Chavi Martinez out of Ontario Black Angels. He had a D number, 6867. He also was made MA in the 1980s. And our show was still active in 1995, but was out by at least 2012. There was a Hector Shark Martinez. I think he was out of Orange County. I have notes that he was in the San Ojeda car, but paroled in 1992. Let me know if you know about this vato. There was Hilario Capone Martinez out of Escondido. He had an H number, 92036. I show that he hit CDC in 1998 and was made MA in the 1990s. He was later moved to Kern Valley State Prison and most recently has been housed at Corcoran. I show there was a Jack Martinez somewhere in LA County. He had a B number, 52529, and was born in 1947. I show that he was MA in the 1970s and was housed at Pelican Bay in 2008, but I'm unsure of his current status. There was a John, a.k.a. Johnny/Crow Martinez out of Orange County. He had a J number, 52893. And has been housed at Salinas Valley State Prison for several years now. There was another Johnny Martinez. He might be Johnny Sr. because they're both John R's. This Johnny Martinez was out of Bellflower, and he had a B number, 13604, and was born in 1948. I believe he was MA in the 1970s. Then there was Johnny Sleepy Martinez from the Avenues. He had a P number, 11933, and hit CDC in 1998. I show he's been housed at Kern Valley State Prison for many years. By the way, I guess another guy got killed at North Kern Valley State Prison. Like I said, I won't talk about current incidents, but just in case you haven't heard yet. According to the CDC press release, he appears to be out of Southern California. There was a Juan Husky Martinez out of LA. He was locked up in the Youth Authority in 1994. And then got busted on assault with a deadly weapon and came in with a P number in 1998. He got out on that number and then caught a eluding lease and was redesignated with a V number, 6566. He was housed at Lancaster for a while and currently, I believe, is in a healthcare facility. Then we have Mariano Jesus, a.k.a. Chuy Martinez, who was out of VNE. Chuy is an interesting individual. While Barrio Nueva Estrada has produced many ME members over the years, including many informants, my understanding is he was more of a high roller, more of a dope dealer, a player, a businessman, if you will. But eventually he got popped and came into the system with a C number, 73488. I show that he was locked up at Folsom Prison in 1984, which was right before my time. He became a part of the Topo Peters car and thus was close to boxer Enriquez, who also did time at Folsom. I understand that he used to hang out at Luminarias, which I've been to, is a pretty nice restaurant with a nice view of LA, and was known as being a hangout for Mexican Mafia members as well as cops. I sat there once with Moco, and he sat at his favorite table and pointed it across the way at other tables and said that's where the MA members would sit, and they would smile and wave to each other. So it's kind of interesting there, that dynamic. And it was all good. They let each other relax and enjoy their meal, but they never took their eyes off of each other. Eventually, Chuy's rise in the MA, again, was due to him being a very good businessman, especially in the drug business. But he's also involved in other businesses, some of them that were legit, but I'm sure were used to wash money. He became engaged in a violent war with John Stranger Tursiak, who was from Rockwood, and there were many deaths on both sides. Many MA and camaradas were working for Stranger, but didn't know that all the time he was actually a government informant. And although they kept him on a loose chain, he was not supposed to commit homicides, something that he violated, if not by his own hand, by his orders via his emissaries. Finally, the feds had enough of Stranger and took him down and locked him up. At the same time, they took down Chuy Martinez's operation, and he was given BOP number 01089-748. He did time at Marion as well as other facilities and was doing life without. He later on passed in June of 2014. There was Peter Big Pete Martinez from the Avenues. He had an A number, 87701. and was born in 1942. I believe he was made MA sometime in the 1960s, but he ended up falling out of favor and was hit by other MA members in the San Quentin laundry room in 1973. One of those involved was Memo Garcia, who I understand later locked it up. Big Pete survived his attack and also dropped out and disappeared off the radar. Then there was Ricardo Gato Martinez. I could probably do a special episode on him and some of these other guys. Gato was out of San Diego, Logan Heights, and he first came in with a B number, 62518. He was made M in the 1970s and has been seen in multiple pictures with some major guys. Gato was big into moving dope and actually did federal time back in 1965 due to moving Chihuahua. He paroled in 1967, but was popped again and placed at CRC Norco, which means he had an N number. He paroled in 1970 and was in and out in the 1970s and early 80s. He got busted for meth and a firearm in 1982 and was incarcerated at CIM in 1983 through 1986. He got out, and due to another meth bust, he was housed at Leavenworth in 1993. He also did some time at Lompoc and was indicted in June 2006 on a RICO case. He was given life and then housed at Lewisburg. Gato was very close to Rube Soto as well as Taiwa Marin Romero, who I discussed in part 1 of the M's. One minor correction on that. Taiwa was actually from San Diego, Logan Heights, but I believe his barbershop headquarters was a national city. He also had a home address in Chula Vista. So sometimes when I cite where they're from, I'm referring to their last known address. As I've often said previously, many times these guys haven't lived in their OG barrios for years, sometimes decades. So sorry if there was any confusion. Gato's girlfriend at one time was the director of Barrio Station in San Diego, Rachel Ortiz. Rachel would visit the Carnales and I understand finally was barred from entering any CDC institution. I understand that Gato started going with Rachel after she left George Mums, aka Silent Ruiz, as seen here. He was then housed at Allenwood and then housed at Cannon in 2019, where he was celled up with a Sureño who ended up killing him. This was not a sanctioned hit, and that Sureño immediately locked it up. There was Robert Crow Martinez from the San Gabriel Valley. He had an H number, 42181. I showed he was made MA in the early 1990s, and I have noticed that he was part of the Southside government, which was a movement that had started in the early 90s that was very short-lived. But yes, there was a Southside government. I show he also was locked up at the LA County Jail, and I'm unsure what happened to him after that, but I know a lot of those guys were put on the lista. The MA edict had just come out, and the MA did not want competition. They liked the Camarada system, not the Southside government proposed system by Bessie Sagado and others. There was Robert Playboy, a.k.a. Wolf Martinez, out of White Fence. I remember this guy at New Folsom back in 1988, not too long after I started working, and I questioned some of the officers. They told me that he was MA. Well, if he was not made, he definitely was a close associate. I watched his movidas very closely after that. Eventually, he did get made, I believe by 1998, and continued to function very heavily. I believe he also was active in the LA County Jail, but I'm unsure of his current status. There was Robert Trompas Martinez from Garrity Loma. He was with the MA back in the 1970s, and I'm unsure what happened to him after that. There was Robert Ratun Martinez out of Brole. He had an A number, 33742, then got out and came back with a B number, 13604. He was active with the MA in the 1960s through 70s. I believe I have an MA card where he's documented in 1974, but I understand overdosed and died. There's Ruben Chico Martinez out of East LA. I think he might be from El Hoyo Maravilla, but I'm not 100% positive on that. He had a B number back in the 70s, 63396, then was released and came back with a C number, 42288, then was released on that number and came back with a D number. This guy just couldn't stay out, 1476. I understand he was popped in Reno in 1991 and then was housed at Wasco State Prison in 1994 with an H number, 73658. I show he was popped for dope in 1999 and did some time at Delano around 2002 and had multiple parole violations. I'm unsure of his current status. There was Ruben Cubal Martinez out of El Hoyo Soto. He had an A number, 28966. Was MA in the 1970s. He got out on the A number and then was reincarcerated on a D number, 22729. Understand that he was involved in the Lancaster riot in 2001, but being as he was born in 1935, he may now be deceased. There was Thomas Killer Martinez from Dogtown. He had a B number in the 1970s and then came back into the system with an H number, 2289, and I believe is no longer affiliated. There was Ralph, aka Ralphie, aka Rafa Mata from Florencia, who was cousins with Biggs Mata. Ralph had a B number, 33281. He was housed at San Quentin in 1973, but was out by 1975. Understand that he paroled in the late 70s and disappeared. Robert Biggs Mata was out of Compton, Barrio Tres, and like I said, was cousins of Ralph. Biggs had a B number, 23991. He was M in the 1970s and housed at Tehachapi, whereby he was involved in the homicide of an NF member named Yogi Bear Arias on October 19th, 1972. Due to that hit and other movidas, he had quite a bit of juice with La M, but understand is now deceased. Then there was Timothy, a.k.a. Timo, a.k.a. Eskimo McGee, out of Toonerville. He hit the California Youth Authority around 1990, then had assault with a deadly weapon in Ontario in 1999, whereby he got his J number, 44140, but then got out on that. This guy went on a murdering rampage and scared a lot of Los Angeles the time he was out. Some of the murder cases he was involved on were dropped, but refiled around 2003 when he was caught, and he was housed at the LA County Jail in 2004. He ended up being convicted of several of those cases and ended up being put on San Quentin's death row. But due to Governor Gavin Newsom shutting down death row and basically turning San Quentin prison into a Shangri-La resort, he was moved to the California training facility at Soledad, where he currently resides. I might have to do a special episode on Eskimo. There was Ismael Azteca Medina, who was from Mexico. He was active in the MA in the 1980s. I show that he was popped for a 187 in 1984 and given a D number, 46723. I'm not sure how, but after a few years, he was deported to Mexico. But that didn't last long because he came right back and did time at several CDC facilities. Understand that he ran a lot of the paisas at Calipatria and was in the Güero Sherm car. I also understand that he had ties to Chino Padua from DF and Chispas Vivar from 18th Street, as well as Fox Tapia. If any of you guys can verify that, let me know. But I understand that he got stabbed at Calipatria. I'm not sure if that was over politics or what. Maybe some of you guys can enlighten me. There was Richard Burpee Medina out of Coachella. He had a D number, 76247. It was made MA sometime in the 1980s and remained active through the mid-1990s. I show he was no longer in custody as of 2012. There was Stephen Bosco Medina at a Sotel, which is an old barrio that I'm not even sure exists anymore. This guy is covered in MA tattoos, as seen here, and did a lot of time in the federal system, including Leavenworth, and has been housed for several years now at the ADX in Florence, Colorado. There was Hector Chacho Medrano out of Vista, but I also had ties to Phoenix, Arizona. I don't believe he's ever done any CDC time, which means he had it made in the feds. I heard this guy was a big mover of methamphetamine, also known as ice, on the street. He did about 25 years in the feds, but was released in early 2022. There was Richard Rich Mexico out of LA. Understand that at one time he ran around with an Aryan Brotherhood member named Fat Jack Burt, but ended up dropping out of the MA and was moved to Mule Creek State Prison, which is known as a PC yard, and became very involved in a 12-step program called Gangs Anonymous, patterned after AA and NA. I think that's a good thing, actually, because I've known several gang members that when they're no longer affiliated, actually go through a withdrawal-like symptoms. After they drop out, they basically feel like they're a nobody. And often, due to their depression, they start self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. So I actually think that's a good program. So right on, Rich. More power to you. There was Anthony Cholo Mendez. I'm not sure if he was with the Black Angels, but I show that he was close to Tupi Hernandez, but ended up being killed at Pelican Bay. I'm not sure behind Tupi what was the case there. Maybe some of you guys know what happened. It's really hard to keep up with all these guys. There was Jesse Mendez out of Highland Park. He had a C number, 80058. I showed that he was an MA member at New Folsom Beef Facility around 1990, but I believe is no longer in custody. There was Mauricio Psycho Mendez out of San Diego Paradise Hills. This guy was a tax collector in the San Diego area, but I guess thought that he earned his black hand and was mistaken. I know a lot of other guys posed in pictures with this guy too because of that black hand. When people see that, they know that means Mexican Mafia. There are no bones about it. You cannot have that black hand in California prison system or the Bureau of Prisons and not be a California inmate. They own that symbol. He had a J number 73174 and then paroled on that number in 2005. He was popped in Operation Keys to the City, which was an operation that took place in San Diego County by the Violent Crimes Task Force. Authorities documented that Psycho was tracked on several phone calls and was discussing Mexican Mafia business over the phone. He did try to code it by saying that he was a member of that San Diego car club and would sign huilas using Maclaclome, which is a Mexican indigenous symbol for the number 13. Case also documented that he instructed Mexican Mafia associate Rodolfo Lopez at Donovan State Prison to order the stabbings of 4 Sureño members on the MA hit list and told Lopez that he wanted to put holes in them, but he ended up having his card pulled even after he put in so much work. He is currently housed in a halfway house scheduled for release in December 2025. And finally, we have Raymond Champ Mendez, who is out of Orange County and claimed F Troop. The interesting thing about Champ is he was a registered interviewer for the public defender's office there in Orange County and even had his own business card, as seen here. Meanwhile, he was carrying messages to and from Mexican Mafia members who were incarcerated in the Orange County jail. Champ had an E number, 32293, and was indicted in the first RICO case in 1995. He was housed at Marion as well as the ADX, Hazleton, and currently resides at Victorville, which the MA is highly sought as a stronghold since it is located in Southern California. Champ has been seen in multiple pictures with other MA members, in particular with Raymond Weddle Shyrock from Arta. Champ has several prominent Mexican Mafia tattoos, including a black hand over his heart and a large M on his back, with the Mexican eagle from the Mexican flag, which is another commonly used Mexican Mafia symbol. And so I know I went pretty quick today, but I'm trying to get through these M's and just leave one more episode left. Just for your information, I'll be taking a little break after that, as I have several episodes that have been on the back burner that I've been putting off. After I'm done with releasing those videos, I will resume with the N through Z last names of Mexican Mafia members over the past 60 plus years. I hope you enjoyed this episode and continue watching more. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off. Gangsters, cops, and politicians.